The question that changed everything. It was a quiet Sunday morning in Palo Alto. The sky was soft and golden, the kind of light that made everything feel gentle. Sundar Pichai sat on the back patio of his home, sipping warm chai and enjoying the rare stillness. Birds chirped in the distance, and the air carried the scent of blooming jasmine. For once, there were no back-to-back meetings, no press calls, no presentations. Just peace. His 10-year-old son, Arav, was lying on a picnic blanket. Nearby, reading a children's book about world cultures. He was a curious child, sharp for his age, always full of questions. Sundar loved these quiet moments with him away from the boardrooms, away from the spotlight, just father and son. Sundar had been talking about taking Arav to India for the first time. Not the usual vacation in Goa or a quick stop in Mumbai, but a real journey through small villages, dusty roads, and old memories. He wanted his son to understand where he came from, not just as the CEO of a trillion-dollar company, but as a boy from a modest two-room house in Chennai. He wanted him to see both the beauty and the struggle. As Sundar scrolled through his emails on his tablet, Arav suddenly looked up, his face serious, his tone quiet but full of weight. "Papa," he said softly, "why can't we end hunger?" Sundar looked up, blinking. The question caught him completely off guard. "What do you mean, beta?" Arav turned the book around. It had a photo of a thin boy in tattered clothes, holding an empty bowl. The caption read, "Millions of children go to bed hungry every night." Arav pointed at it. "This says kids are starving. Like, right now. Even as we're sitting here, but we have so much food in the kitchen. There's food in our fridge we don't even eat. Why doesn't someone just give it to them?" Sundar set the tablet down slowly. He stared at his son, trying to find the right words. This wasn't one of those "where do babies come from" questions. This wasn't about planets or dinosaurs, video games. This was something deeper. A question that had haunted generations. A question that had no simple answer. He took a deep breath. "It's complicated," Sundar began, but Arav frowned. "But why? We send rockets to space. We make phones that talk to us. We build cars that drive themselves. How is giving food hard?" His voice wasn't angry. It was honest, innocent, and somehow that made it hurt even more. Sundar felt a knot in his chest. This wasn't the first time he had heard a question like this. But this time it was different because it was his son asking, and because he had no good answer. "People try," Sundar said quietly. "Governments, charities, volunteers, many people try. But sometimes food doesn't reach the right place. Sometimes there isn't enough money. Sometimes there are too many problems in the way." "But you're Sundar Pichai," Arav said, eyes wide. "You're the boss of Google. Can't you do something?" The words hit him like a wave. He smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "Being the boss of Google doesn't mean I can fix everything. But maybe you can fix one thing," Arav said. "Just one." That night, Sundar couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation again and again in his head. For years, he had donated to causes. Google.org had invested in food banks and relief programs. He had seen charts and reports and spreadsheets, but never had he felt the question so personally. He remembered the days when he and his brother shared a single bicycle, the long walks to the ration shop, his mother cutting onions slowly to make them last for 2 meals. They had never starved, but they had felt hunger, real hunger. The kind that sat in your stomach and didn't leave for hours. He had left that world behind. Or so he thought. The next morning he got up early. He didn't tell his team where he was going. He just told his assistant to cancel the first half of his day. He drove alone to San Francisco and parked near a shelter. He remembered donating to years ago, thought it was different seeing it up close. Outside, a group of people were lined up. A woman clutched a paper bag like it was gold. A man was kneeling next to a child, tying her shoes with fingers that shook from the cold. Sundar stood at a distance, unsure of what to say, unsure of what to do. He walked in quietly and met with the shelter manager. Her name was Carmen. Double quotes, "Mr. Pichai," she said, surprised but composed. This is unexpected. I need to understand something, he said gently. How does this keep happening? How are so many people still hungry here in one of the richest places on earth? Carmen looked tired. Not the kind of tired from lack of sleep, but the kind of tired that came from seeing the same pain every day and never being able to fully stop it. Because systems are broken? She replied, because food gets wasted. Because policies don't always help. Because people forget these faces exist. She paused, then asked, why are you really here? He hesitated. My son asked me a question, Sundar finally said, and I couldn't answer it. She nodded slowly. That's a good reason to start. They talked for 2 hours. Carmen showed him their kitchen, their cold storage, their supply chain. He watched volunteers sort canned goods and serve soup. He spoke to a young man named Derek who used to be a software intern but lost his job after his mother got sick. Now he slept in his car and came to the shelter for food. You can't code on an empty stomach, Derek said with a sad smile. And Sundar left the shelter. He didn't drive home. Instead, he parked at a nearby cafe and sat with a notebook. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about product launches or quarterly earnings. He was thinking about food, how it's grown, stored, wasted, and shared. And mostly, he was thinking about one line, maybe you can fix one thing. That night, during dinner, Sundar sat across from Arav, watching him eat. The boy was cheerful again, chatting about school and football. But Sundar had something on his mind. Beta, he said softly. What if we tried to build something? Something that helps more people get food. Arav's eyes lit up. Like a machine? No, Sundar chuckled. Not a machine. Something smarter. Maybe an app? Or a program? Or a system that helps people find food near them? Something that makes it easier to give. Easier to share. Easier to care. Double quotes. A V leaned forward. Curious. Can I help? You already did, Sundar said with a smile. You asked the question. They spent the next hour sketching wild ideas on the back of a grocery receipt. Sundar explained supply chains in simple words. Arav suggested using maps and alerts. By bedtime, they had a rough outline of something neither of them fully understood yet, but they knew it was important. Meanwhile, across town, a software engineer named Emily checked her fridge and felt guilty throwing out leftovers. In another city, a farmer was burning surplus crops he couldn't sell. And in a school cafeteria, trays of uneaten food were being dumped in silence. None of them knew that a quiet question from a 10-year-old boy was about to begin something extraordinary. And neither did Sundar. Because the next morning, when he pitched the idea to his executive team, one person pushed back hard. A powerful board member, someone who had other plans. And what he said in that meeting would change everything. Asterisk the resistance inside the boardroom. Meeting room on the top floor of the Googleplex was bathed in warm morning light, with panoramic windows overlooking the sprawling Silicon Valley. It was a space where billion-dollar ideas were debated, refined, and approved. The walls were covered in sleek interactive panels, and the air always smelled faintly of fresh coffee and quiet urgency. On this particular morning, Sundar stood at the head of the long glass table, his fingers resting lightly on a slim folder, not a digital presentation. This wasn't going to be one of his usual product briefings. Around the table sat some of the most influential minds in the company: engineers, strategists, financial experts, legal advisors. But at the far end sat Raymond Baird, the longest-serving board member, a sharp-eyed man known for his rigid focus on shareholder value. He didn't smile often, and when he did, it was rarely for the right reasons. Sundar looked out at the faces before him. He cleared his throat and spoke, not with rehearsed corporate language, but with quiet conviction. I want to start something new, he said. Something that isn't about profit, but about purpose. The room shifted, brows raised in curiosity. This wasn't the usual tone. Yesterday, he continued, my son asked me why we haven't ended hunger. It wasn't a political question. It was honest, from the heart. And I didn't know what to tell him. He paused, letting that silence sit. We have the tools, he said, voice stronger now. We have the data, the infrastructure, the people. I want to build a global platform that connects food donors, restaurants, grocery stores, farms with shelters, families, and communities in need in real time. Using AI maps and logistics, imagine a system where no surplus food ever goes to waste, where hungry mouths get fed not in weeks, but in hours. He opened the folder and spread out. The sketches he and I had drawn childish in appearance, but filled with surprising insight. This is the seed, Sundar said. I want us to grow it. For a moment, the room was quiet. A few murmurs of interest floated through the air. A young engineer leaned forward, clearly intrigued. The head of sustainability nodded thoughtfully, but Raymond Baird narrowed his eyes. This is not our mandate, he said slowly. We're not a food bank. We're a tech company. Sundar met his gaze. We're also a company that shapes the future. Raymond didn't flinch. The board expects growth. This, he gestured at the sketches, is charity disguised as innovation. And unless there's a clear revenue model, it doesn't belong on our roadmap. A low tension rippled through the room. Some looked away. Others stiffened. Sundar stayed calm, but inside he felt a flicker of heat. Not anger, but resolve. Not everything we build has to be monetized, he said. This could be part of Google.org. It can live outside our usual framework, but it has to live. Raymond leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his notebook. And what if it fails? What if we pour resources into this and it goes nowhere? What message does that send to our investors? That we care? Sundar replied simply. The room held its breath. Raymond didn't speak again, but the damage was done. The room's energy shifted. The project wasn't killed outright, but it wasn't embraced either. Sundar felt it, the weight of hesitation. And worse, indifference. After the meeting, a few team members approached him privately. I think it's a beautiful idea, one whispered. But maybe you should do it quietly, off the books. Another added, you know how Raymond is? If he senses it's going to challenge traditional priorities, he'll block it. Sundar nodded, listening. But inside, something was shifting. That night, he sat with Arav again. They were working on homework, but Sundar's mind kept drifting back to the boardroom. Arav noticed. Papa, did they like the idea? He asked. Sundar hesitated, then smiled gently. Some did. Some didn't. Arav looked confused. Why? Wouldn't they? It helps people. Sometimes, Sundar said slowly, people forget to care. They get used to doing things one way. They worry about what they'll lose if things change. But if nobody tries, Arav said, nothing changes. Those words echoed louder than anything that was said in the meeting. The next morning, Sundar made a decision. If the board wouldn't fully support the project, he would do it another way. Not through a corporate directive, but as a personal mission. And quietly, he began assembling a small, independent team of engineers, data scientists, and logistics experts from within the company. People who believed in the idea. People who didn't need a bonus or a spotlight. Just a reason. They met in a small, unused office in Building F, behind the old campus library. No branding, no name, just a shared goal. They started mapping out the real problems: food wastage, inefficient distribution, outdated policies. They spoke to shelter directors, food bank coordinators, truck drivers. They learned that sometimes a shipment of perfect would rot in a warehouse because no one could pick it up in time. Or that restaurants threw out trays of cooked meals because of health codes. Even when those meals could have fed dozens. Every problem was followed by a question. What if there was a better way? Meanwhile, Sundar made a quiet visit to a grocery chain's distribution center in Oakland. He walked through aisles stacked with pallets of bananas, milk, bread. He saw the expiration zone, an area where near-expired goods sat waiting to be discarded. What happens to this? He asked. The manager. Some gets donated if we have the right partners. The man replied. Most of it, a landfill. Sundar asked for data. The numbers were staggering. On the way home, he called Arav from the car. Remember your question? Sundar said, that double quotes, yeah? We're going to answer it, one small piece at a time. But as momentum grew, word began to spread, not through official channels, but whispers, curiosity. People asking about Sundar's secret team. Raymond heard about it too. And he wasn't pleased. A week later, Sundar received an email. It wasn't a direct threat, but a polite reminder of board expectations and resource allocations. It ended with a sentence that lingered in his mind all evening. Your position requires focus on measurable outcomes, not emotional crusades. Sundar closed his laptop. He looked out the window. His reflection stared back at him, a man caught between worlds. But just then, Arav walked in with a bowl of popcorn, smiling. Movie night? He asked. Sundar nodded, forcing a smile. They sat together, watching a documentary on climate change. Halfway through, there was a segment about farmers in Africa using old phones to access market prices, helping them earn fair wages. Sundar saw the parallels. After the movie, Arav curled up and said, Papa, maybe the app should have pictures. Like, so people can see what food is available near them, not just words. Sundar froze. Pictures, he repeated. Yes, that's brilliant. He got up, grabbed his notebook, and started sketching. He knew now it wasn't about building a perfect system overnight. It was about solving one problem at a time. He didn't need full board approval. Not yet. He just needed to prove it. Could work. And that chance would come sooner than he expected. Because 3 days later, a massive storm hit Central California and it left thousands stranded. Shelters were overwhelmed. Roads were blocked. Food supplies were low. And Sundar's quiet project was about to face its first real test. Asterisk the storm and the spark it began with wind. Not the kind that whispered through trees or rustled curtains. Gently, but a furious, howling roar that shook rooftops and rattled windows like an angry drumbeat. By midnight, the skies had turned a deep gray-black, and rain slammed against the earth with the force of 1,000 fists. News stations called it the worst storm in Central California in over 2 decades. Power lines collapsed. Highways turned into rivers. Thousands of homes were without power, without heat. And soon, without food. In Fresno County, the situation grew dire by morning. The flooding had cut off access to several rural towns. Families were stranded. Shelves in small stores were bare. Shelters that typically serve 50 meals a day were now trying to feed hundreds. Supply chains had frozen. Emergency response. Units were stretched thin and hundreds of miles away in Mountain View. Sundar Pichai's phone buzzed at 5:42 a.m. He blinked awake to the alert. Shelter in Clovis. Urgently requests food supply. No deliveries in 48 hours. 120 people inside. His heart skipped. This was the moment. Within minutes. He was dressed and heading to the secret office in Building F. His core team, 6 engineers, 1 ex-logistics manager, and a data analyst, were already gathered. Coffee cups steamed, screens glowed, maps lit up with clusters of red and yellow. The storm had exposed everything they had studied, supply delays, disconnects, communication gaps, but now it was all real, all happening in real time. How many shelters are reporting shortages? Sundar asked as he stepped in. 12. Already. Most in the Fresno Bakersfield region, replied Maya, the data analyst, her voice tight with urgency. We're estimating at least 2,000 people without immediate access to food by the end of the day. Sundar took a deep breath. Can we deploy the system? We haven't even launched a full beta, said Rishi, the lead engineer. We have prototype mapping, basic AI routing, and limited donor coordination. We don't need perfect, Sundar said. We need now. The team sprang into action. Within hours, they activated their early version of the platform, dubbed Project Nourish. Using open-source maps and crowdsourced logistics, the app connected shelters with nearby restaurants, cafes, and small groceries that had surplus food and were still operational. It also called upon individual volunteers, people who own trucks, 4-wheel drives, or even Boats. One local bakery in Madeira received a ping through the system. The owner, Mrs. Callahan, had trays of unsold bread, muffins, and fruit tarts. Donate. Moments later, a retired firefighter named Omar received a route alert on his phone. He owned a pickup and lived only 10 blocks away. Within 30 minutes, he had loaded the food and was on his way to the shelter in Clovis. The impact was immediate. Within 6 hours, Project Nourish had rerouted over 4,000 pounds of food. Volunteers from neighboring counties responded with offers to deliver supplies. Drones were even tested to reach areas still inaccessible by road. And all the while, Arav watched the dashboard from his home tablet, amazed. Papa, it's working. He whispered as little blue icons blinked across the map, each one a life-touch. But behind the scenes, the pressure was mounting. Media had caught wind of the effort. A local journalist posted a story titled, CEO of Google launches secret food rescue platform during storm. It went viral within hours. Calls flooded Sundar's office. News outlets wanted statements. City officials asked for access. And then there was Raymond Baird. He showed up unannounced at Sundar's office that evening. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with unspoken frustration. You've gone too far, Raymond said, closing the door behind him. Sundar looked up from his laptop, exhausted but steady. I did what was needed. You bypassed the board. You allocated internal resources without approval. And now the media is turning this into a Google initiative. Shareholders will ask questions. Sundar stood slowly. Raymond, thousands of people were hungry today. Some might have gone to bed without food. We had the tools to help, so we did. Raymond leaned closer. This is about control. You made a move without us. And now we have a crisis of messaging. Sundar shook his head. No, Raymond. We have a crisis of conscience. If our tools can save lives, then it's our responsibility to use them. Raymond walked out without another word. But Sundar knew the backlash wasn't over. Still, something had shifted. Emails began pouring in from people around the world. A restaurant owner in Texas, a university student in Kenya, a retired nurse in Poland. They all wanted to help. To replicate Project Nourish in their cities, in their countries, Sundar and his team realized this wasn't just a one-time operation. The storm had become a spark. Over the next few days, they worked nonstop, refining the system. Engineers rewrote code for scalability. Designers created a user-friendly interface. Partnerships were quietly formed with delivery services and food networks, all under the radar because official approval hadn't come. And Sundar didn't care anymore. Arav visited the office with him on the 4th day. He walked around, eyes wide, watching the team work. You're really doing it, he whispered, clutching his dad's hand. No, Sundar said with a smile. We're doing it. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. One of the volunteers, Omar, the retired firefighter who had delivered bread, posted a video online. It showed him handing out muffins to kids at the Clovis shelter. In the background, a woman hugged her son tightly as they shared a hot meal for the first time in days. The caption read, "This app saved lives today." And it started with a 10-year-old boy who asked a question. Within 24 hours, the video had over 4 million views. Soon, celebrities began sharing it. Athletes, tech influencers, even school teachers. Hashtag #WhyCanTweeners started trending globally. Schools began holding donation drives. Small restaurants across the country pledged to use their leftovers for good. And just when I felt like the world was finally listening, an internal leak occurred. One of the board assistants, loyal to Raymond, leaked internal emails showing that Sundar had used company time and resources for an unsanctioned project. News headlines shifted. Google CEO under fire for rogue humanitarian program. Is Sundar Pichai risking shareholder trust for personal ideals, charity, or corporate chaos? Sundar was summoned to an emergency board session. This time, not in Mountain View, but at the corporate headquarters in San Francisco. The tone was clear. This wasn't a discussion. It was a reckoning dot as he stood outside the massive boardroom doors. Heart pounding, he glanced at his phone. There was a message from a RAV dot, just 5 words. Remember why he started this. He smiled, then walked in, ready for the battle that awaited. The boardroom in San Francisco was colder than Sundar remembered. Not just in temperature, but in mood. The tall glass windows overlooked the buzzing skyline, but the light inside was sterile and clinical. Every detail was polished to perfection. The white marble table gleamed. The walls were lined with carefully framed global accolades, and the black leather chairs sat rigid, as if warning those who dared to speak out of line. But Sundar had never felt so prepared, not because he had all the right answers, but because this time he had purpose. Something greater than a quarterly report. Around the table sat 12 board members, each a force in their own right. Lawyers, economists, venture capitalists, former government officials. These were people used to hearing forecasts and charts, not emotional appeals. Raymond Baird sat near the center, arms crossed, eyes sharp, already armed with papers and printed headlines. The chairperson, Margot Hennessy, tapped her pen twice on the table, signaling the meeting had begun. "Mr. Pichai," she said, "we're here today to discuss your unauthorized launch of what's now being referred to as Project Nourish." Sundar remained silent for a moment, letting the words settle in the room. "Yes," he said softly. "We are." Raymond jumped in immediately. "You've diverted internal teams, used company infrastructure, and publicly associated Google with a platform that bypassed all necessary approvals." His voice was cold, firm, and pointed. "And what's worse," he continued, "you've placed us in the middle of a global conversation we were never prepared for. Shareholders are calling. Regulators are watching. The media is spinning it in every direction." Sundar listened without flinching. When Raymond finished, Sundar stood up slowly. "I understand the concern," he said. "I truly do. But let me ask you all a question. When was the last time one of our products saved someone from going hungry?" There was silence. "We've built search engines, phones, cloud systems. We've changed how people live, work, and communicate. But what if we could also change how people survive?" He took out a small tablet and tapped on the screen. A slideshow began, no graphs, no branding. Just images. A father in a flooded Fresno shelter holding a box of groceries with tears in his eyes. A child biting into warm bread with crumbs on her cheeks and laughter in her smile. An elderly woman sending a message through the app. "Thank you for remembering we exist." The room stayed quiet. "We didn't plan this storm," Sundar said. "But when it came, we had a choice. To watch or to act." He paused, then added, "We acted." Raymond rolled his eyes. "With respect, Sundar, this isn't about morality. It's about governance. You made a unilateral decision. We cannot function like that." Sundar looked directly at him. "Raymond, if every act of kindness required a board vote, humanity would have collapsed long ago." Someone in the back stifled a smile. Margot leaned forward. "You're not wrong, Sundar," she said slowly. "But you're also not following protocol. What you've built, whether intentional or not, has become a global movement. And movements come with risk. What's your plan?" Sundar straightened. "Open source it," he said. "Let it belong to the people. Let developers from around the world contribute. Let small communities adapt it. And let Google.org manage the backbone, not the business division. It becomes a gift, not a product." That surprised the room. Raymond scowled. "You want to give away a system we spent resources to build?" "Yes," Sundar said, without hesitation. "Because its value is not in ownership. It's in impact." He took a deep breath. "We say we want to make the world's information accessible and useful. What's more useful than letting someone know where their next meal is?" He tapped the tablet again, and a message popped up from the live feed of Project Nourish. A young woman named Rena in Oakland had just picked up 10 boxes of donated groceries from a store using the app. She typed, "I didn't have to choose." Between feeding my kids and paying rent today, thank you. Sundar turned off the screen and looked around the room. That's the kind of shareholder return I'm willing to fight for. For a moment, no one spoke. And then, slowly, Margot nodded. You'll need to make adjustments. Legal will have to review. Communications will need to craft a statement. And the board will require weekly updates. Sundar nodded. Double quotes done. She looked at him firmly. But understand this, Sundar. If this becomes a liability, it will be on you. I accept that, he said, then proceed. With caution. As the board moved on to the next agenda item, Sundar exhaled deeply. The battle wasn't over, but for now, the mission had survived. Later that night, he returned home exhausted. Arav was waiting for him, bouncing on the couch with excitement. Did you win, Papa? Sundar smiled faintly. We didn't win, but they didn't stop us either. He told Arav everything about the meeting, the pushback, the approval. The boy listened carefully, then pulled out a crayon drawing. It was a sketch of a big heart with little houses around it. Each house had people smiling inside, holding plates of food. This is what the app does, Arav said proudly. Sundar looked at the drawing for a long time. You're right. He whispered. Across the world, people were now hearing about Project Nourish. Tech blogs covered it with surprise and admiration. Government agencies in developing countries reached out. Small nonprofits asked to pilot it. College students offered to code. Truck drivers volunteered to deliver. But in the shadows, not everyone was supportive. A powerful lobbying group, connected to major food distributors and waste contractors, began raising concerns. They feared that Project Nourish would disrupt contracts, expose inefficiencies, and challenge existing profit streams. They began whispering to senators, writing op-eds, and planting doubts. And in a quiet conference room in Washington, D.C., a decision was made to investigate the platform for potential regulatory overreach. The news reached Sundar the next morning. As he read the notice, his heart sank, but not from fear. From understanding. This wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about power. And the question his son had asked was about to shake the world even harder than he'd imagined. Asterisk, a question that rattled the powerful. Letter arrived not by email, but by courier stamped, official, heavy with implication. Sundar held it in his hand as he stood by the window in his office. Outside, the sun cast long golden shadows across the campus lawn, but inside the air felt tense, coiled. The envelope was marked United States Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. Inside, neatly folded, was a formal notice. Project Nourish was now under federal review for possible violation of interstate food safety and transport regulations, and Sundar was requested summoned to appear before the subcommittee in Washington within 10 days. He read the letter twice, then set it down and pressed both palms to the edge of his desk. It had begun. The success of Project Nourish had attracted attention faster than anyone anticipated. While it was built quietly and rolled out compassionately, its explosive impact during the California storm had created waves in industries far beyond tech. Powerful food corporations, logistics giants, and waste management companies were now feeling the ripples, and many didn't like what they saw, because for every box of food redirected to a shelter, someone somewhere was losing a contract. Asterisk. For every meal saved from being wasted, an outdated profit model was being challenged. And now, the protectors of those systems had begun to push back. That night, Sundar didn't go home immediately. He stayed at the office after dark, staring at a map of the United States on a digital display wall. Blue dots pulsed across the map, each one representing a successful food match through Project Nourish. Tiny beacons of hope. In just 3 weeks, over 94,000 meals had been delivered through surplus donations. Schools, shelters, single mothers, elderly couples, all fed through a system that shouldn't have needed to exist in the first place. His team had created algorithms to predict food surplus in real time. Drivers were being routed dynamically based on weather, traffic, and urgency. Developers from Brazil, India, and Kenya had contributed code to improve the app's functionality. It had become more than a tool, it was a movement. And yet the threat looming now wasn't technological. It was political. The next morning, Sundar met with a crisis team, legal advisors, policy experts, communications professionals. They laid out the risks, lawsuits, subpoenas, even possible personal liability if things escalated. You need to distance yourself from the project, one lawyer advised. Form a separate foundation, appoint a third-party director. Make it clear this is not a Google initiative. Another added, if this becomes a partisan issue, it could damage your credibility, the company's image, even your position. Sundar listened carefully, nodding at times, but deep inside he knew what they were asking. They wanted him to step back. To let go. To retreat. He looked at the room, every suit, every chart, every cautious word, and then he stood up and simply said, no. The room fell silent. Appear before the committee, he said firmly, and I will not separate myself from something that was born out of purpose. We are not violating safety. We are improving it. We are not stealing business. We are saving lives. And if that offends people in power, then maybe the power needs to change. He left the room without waiting for applause or argument. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Media coverage intensified. Supporters and critics lined up on every side. Sunday morning talk shows debated whether Sundar had crossed the line between CEO and activist. Op-eds were written. Think pieces published. Hashtags exploded again. But in the quiet moments, Sundar found strength in the smallest things. Like the voice message from a mother in Detroit who said, I cried when someone brought us dinner last night. I don't know how your app found us, but thank you. Or the video from a school in New Mexico where students lined up to receive fresh fruit donated, railroaded and delivered within 12 hours. Or the drawing that Arav handed him before he boarded his flight to Washington, a sketch of Sundar standing tall in front of a big building, with the words, My Papa helps people eat. The hearing day arrived. The Capitol building loomed grand and intimidating. Security checks, formal escorts, narrow hallways, all added to the gravity of what lay ahead. Sundar was guided into a long room filled with rows of seats, cameras flashing, and a panel of senators sitting behind raised desks. Microphones waited. Water glasses glistened under the lights. Tension buzzed in the air like static before a storm. Senator Phillips, a stern-faced man with deep lines carved into his brow, leaned forward and began the questioning. Mr. Pichai, thank you for appearing. We appreciate your commitment to public welfare, but we have serious concerns. Sundar nodded. I understand, Senator. You've created a food redistribution system that bypasses traditional supply chains. What guarantees can you provide? That this food is safe? What if someone gets sick? Sundar answered calmly. We've partnered with certified food banks and trained volunteers. Our app uses real-time food freshness indicators and links only approved vendors with licensed shelters. The system does not permit raw, unpackaged goods without proper checks. And yet, Senator Phillips pressed, you launched without federal approval. Because hunger doesn't wait for approval, Sundar said quietly. That line was quoted by every journalist in the room within seconds. Senator Martha Lynn, a woman with bright eyes and a sharp mind, took over. Mr. Pichai, some say you've used your platform irresponsibly. Others say you've stepped into a void that should have been filled long ago. Which is it? Perhaps it's both, Sundar replied. But I would rather be accused of caring too much than doing too little. A ripple of murmurs swept the room. Then came the twist. Senator Groves, known to be backed by food lobbying groups, dropped a file onto the desk. We've received information that your app interfered with several commercial contracts. Grocers are pulling back donations out of fear of being sued by partners. You're disrupting the economy, Mr. Pichai. Sundar stayed composed. If the economy depends on food being thrown away while children go hungry, then disruption is long overdue. The room tensed. The audience behind him stirred. Be careful, Senator Groves warned. Idealism is dangerous when wielded by powerful men. Sundar leaned forward. So was indifference. It was not just a reply. It was a declaration. The hearing continued for hours. Hard questions, careful answers. At times, his voice cracked with fatigue, but his gaze never wavered. He wasn't there to defend Google. He wasn't there to defend himself. He was there for the people no one else had into that room, those who slept in cars, ate from soup kitchens, and still dared to smile through it all. When the session ended, Sundar stepped outside into the cold Washington air. Reporters swarmed him, microphones pushed close. He paused only to say, "This is not about me. This is about a question a child asked his father, and it's a question we all need to answer." He turned and walked down the steps, not as a CEO, but as a father, a citizen, and a man who had dared to listen. Meanwhile, across the globe, something incredible was happening. In the days following the hearing, Project Nourish downloads doubled. Open source developers from 40 countries submitted updates. A coalition of small grocers pledged to support the app openly. And a surprise letter landed on Sundar's desk from the World Food Program. Read, "We'd like to partner. But the greatest surprise was yet to come, because a powerful billionaire, long known for his ruthless business practices, reached out. He requested a private meeting, not through assistants, but directly. His name was Nicholas Hawthorne. And what he said in that meeting would leave Sundar speechless. Asterisk the billionaire's offer and the boy's voice. A meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. at a private estate on the edge of Napa Valley. Sundar wasn't sure what to expect. He had read the name in the email, scanned it twice, and still blinked with disbelief. Nicholas Hawthorne, an elusive tech billionaire, founder of Hawthorne Global Logistics, a man who rarely made public statements and even more rarely requested meetings. He was known for two things: turning freight shipping into a multi-trillion-dollar empire and avoiding any endeavor that wasn't profitable. So when Nicholas asked to meet regarding Project Nourish, Sundar's curiosity outweighed his caution. The estate was sprawling and almost aggressively minimalist. Gray stone walls, clean lines, no unnecessary decoration. Sundar was led through a quiet corridor, past long windows overlooking a vineyard, coated in morning mist, and finally into a sunlit room where Nicholas sat alone. Tall, silver-haired, sharply dressed in a charcoal sweater, he looked less like a businessman and more like a man carved from stillness. He didn't stand to greet Sundar. Instead, he gestured to the seat across from him and said simply, "I saw your hearing." Sundar nodded, cautious. "Thank you for reaching out." Nicholas looked at him, his gaze unreadable. "You were either very brave or very foolish." "Perhaps both," Sundar replied, calm but alert. "You shook things," Nicholas said, finally sitting back. "You rattled supply chains. Exposed inefficiencies. Challenged models that have stood for decades. People are calling me asking if I'm going to sue you. Are you?" Sundar asked. Steady. Nicholas gave a dry laugh. "No, lawsuits are for people who've already lost." He stood up and walked toward the window, then said something Sundar wasn't expecting. "My father died of hunger." The silence that followed was heavy. Nicholas didn't turn around. He spoke as if to the vineyard outside, during a war, in a country no one remembers anymore. "He gave his last meal to me and my mother. I don't remember his face, but I remember the sound his stomach made at night. He turned slowly. I built a logistics empire so no one in my family would ever go hungry again. But somehow, I forgot the rest of the world still does." Sundar didn't interrupt. He listened deeply. Nicholas walked over to a small table, picked up a thin folder, and placed it in front of Sundar. "This is what I'm offering." He said. Inside was a proposal: access to 700 regional distribution centers, a fleet of over 12,000 refrigerated trucks, and a $250 million infrastructure grant to scale Project Nourish globally. No ownership, no control, no board seats. Just access. "Why?" Sundar asked, his voice soft but stunned. Nicholas shrugged. "Because your son asked a question, and the world heard it, and now I hear it too." Sundar blinked, holding back emotion. You don't want anything in return? Just one thing, Nicholas said, his expression more human than ever. Let me help without being remembered for it. Sundar nodded, slowly, reverently. You have my word.